if they like us, we're doing something wrong. And so I was like, yeah, I'm glad this is what these people are saying about us because these people have terrible agendas and they want to wreak a lot of harm on our state. And so I looked at that story and thought, yeah, this is who we are.
Mike Andrews, Aaron Bear, David Mahan joining you, and happy Boxing Day, fellas. By the time that this,
Boxing Day.
yeah,
All
for our
right.
Canadian listeners on December
All two of
26th.
them, right? Exactly.
It is weird. We do have some international listeners that
You
pop
see
up
that?
on the podcast analytics. Makes no
See,
sense.
no,
but
we're worldwide here. Center for
We
Christian
appreciate you both.
Virtue,
yes,
worldwide, everywhere.
worldwide
Yeah.
prestige.
Yeah.
But as our listeners probably know, this is being recorded in advance of Christmas because we're taking time off for the holidays
Yes.
and all that stuff. So Merry Christmas, guys.
Yes.
It's a great time of year, and we're excited to be able to kind of wind down 2025 as we look at some of our favorite stories, some key stories, things that stood out to us throughout the year. So this is going to be a fun conversation and probably lots of nonsense along the way.
A little bit, but it's
Lord
very,
willing.
very serious. We just had our Christmas party at CCV, which was a lot of fun. Our potluck and
Hot mess.
and David was reminded who is the winner on this team when he lost on Christmas movie charades.
Nothing worse than a Christian Christmas party.
He is bitter.
This man cheats.
He is bitter to the end.
Oh my
But sometimes you got to just remind people,
And nobody
you know,
questions
you're-
it. That's the problem, Mike.
why
Like,
you're top
nobody
dollar
questions
here.
this
There was
man
that-
out of fear of losing their job at Christmas.
I'm pretty sure the entire opposite team on charades was questioning it. I was with you.
You guys, you were whining a lot. I heard plenty of whining around the office, but nobody could
Listen,
dispute.
narrative listeners, let me just give some context for you. This was like Michigan overnight in the 2020 election
yeah,
is what
here.
happened.
Yeah.
Is what happened in this charades competition.
Wait, does that make David strong more? Or sorry.
Charade is right. Charade is absolutely right.
Farce. But anyway, it's been a fun holiday season. And as we wrap up 2025, we're just going to take some time, maybe top 3 stories or so. This is blind. This is all on the fly.
Yes.
We didn't talk to each other about what we're bringing to the table here.
We don't talk to each other much anyway. Just generally speaking,
When we really have to.
get off the podcast, there is no
This
communication.
this is kind of our prep for all the family gatherings that are coming up. Of like, how do we pretend to like people that we don't really interact with outside of a few moments every year?
And as an aside, we didn't even mention we're actually in our podcast studio right now,
Absolutely
with our
beautiful.
beautiful podcast table and half of it done. But
Just-
it's gonna be awesome when it's all
You friends, you have no idea what you're in store for in
Exactly.
2026 with the podcast.
Yeah.
It's so exciting. We can't wait to show it off to you. But let's get down to business today. So, Aaron, I'm going to give you first crack at story number 1. What was one of your top stories of 2025?
So of course I came up with 5, but I genuinely am
All right.
going to narrow it down to 3. And I just don't think when we think about the things that are most impactful that happened in 2025, I don't think there's any way to look back on the year and not start with Charlie Kirk's assassination.
Yeah.
And both the sort of immediate fallout of that across the country, right? Of a leader speaking on campus, specifically who, and I quoted Charlie a lot recently over the City Club situation, where Charlie said all the time, the moment we stop talking is the moment things get violent. And he was trying to do exactly that, trying to go into places where people disagreed, and he was murdered while doing that very thing. I think the combination of that political assassination, that I do feel like is going to be a historical landmark to some degree or another, for in our lifetimes. But then the immediate follow-up of the grace extended by Erica Kirk, the massive growth of TPUSA through all of that, of college students coming around. To me, I think it is the biggest story of 2025.
You're influential when it's not just one side of the aisle or the other.
Right.
Like, this is one of those worldview changing moments. 9/11 was a worldview changing moment to a generation. This was one of those, because this is coming on the heels of attempted assassination of our
Of the
current sitting
president,
president.
yeah.
So, and then this happens, and so I think on both sides of the aisle, young and old, this kind of changes how you see the world.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I know this was just a couple weeks ago, and forgive me, I don't recall the source that I saw this in, but it was essentially asking in response to Charlie's assassination, were you more likely to go back to church or be more politically activated?
Yeah.
And the overwhelming response was go back to church.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was such a cool testimony to Charlie's life and what he was trying to do, even as he was engaging in some politically pointed conversations as
Yeah.
part of his work, but it was all about the gospel for him at the end of the day.
Well, and that's where it comes home to CCV, which was we're supposed to have Charlie come speak for us 2 weeks after his assassination, and it was because Charlie's message over the last 2 to 3 years had become so pointed around Jesus and the family and marriage and family, which is frankly what we're about here. And so that to me was the opportunity after Charlie's assassination, where these videos and these clips of him talking about, hey, you know what matters more than voting for President Trump or getting involved in politics is loving Jesus, right? And what actually brings a happy life is not having, conservatives control Congress. It's being married and having kids. And there is just something, I felt there was something I felt so drawn to about Charlie's message, because that's a little bit of mine and Maria's story of, we were very politically active ever since we started dating in college. And there is just something about when you have kids, the way it just changes your worldview, changes the way you understand things. And Charlie's assassination took his message to even more people than ever before. And I don't know how many people I know that, had heard of Charlie Kirk, maybe weren't big fans of Charlie Kirk, but then after his assassination, they started watching his videos and were like, "Oh my gosh, this guy is something different than I thought." Um, and and the combination of that and then that massive memorial service, just where the gospel was proclaimed very clearly. And of course, President Trump did the President Trump stuff. But besides that,
Well,
yeah,
there was that.
there's that. But everybody, Erica forgave the murderer, and Marco Rubio gave such a clear presentation.
Flat preached the gospel.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, a lot of people saw it as like, we say assassination, but a lot of people saw he got martyred.
Yeah.
And the opposition didn't see why he said that. But for a lot of folks, early Charlie Kirk was hyper political.
Yep.
But the last 4 or 5 years was gospel.
Yeah.
And that's how probably half of the demographic saw him.
Yeah.
Was a gospel preacher, standing bold for Jesus on college campuses. Yeah. And so for them, again, worldview changing, because it was like somebody was being martyred.
Yeah.
Just
and
we'll be reading about this.
Oh, we will. And it's, I think as well, with the work we do here, folks are always talking about how divisive things are in America today. And I always would kind of balk at that, because we've had really divisive times in the past. But this to me is just a wake-up call of understanding where we really are in our nation's history. And when you start having people like Charlie assassinated, shots being taken at the president, it really is this is a historic moment we're in, unfortunately, in some bad ways. But like you said, Mike, you're seeing the Lord use this for good. Mm-hmm. Take this tragedy and redeem it. Of course, there's still 2 kids that don't have their dad. There's a wife who's, even now you see her interviews and you still see the pain that she carries. But certainly, so many people are hearing the gospel now that never heard it before.
Yeah. Amen. Well, I'm going to defer to age before beauty and give David
the age and beauty. This particular case.
All right, what you got, man?
Well, anybody's been listening to the podcast knows I am no fan of the media. And I think it's a beautiful thing that we're setting up this beautiful podcast studio in the former office of the Dispatch. But just recently, I think last week even, the Cincinnati Enquirer declared CCV is one of the most powerful, most influential voices at the State House. And I think that is news worthy here in 2025. So if you didn't hear about it, now you know.
Well, hopefully we talked about it last week on the podcast, or will be last week. By the time people hear it.
Yeah, exactly. No, and I do, but I think to David's point, it is a significant mark because when they, when we first got the sort of notice, right, that this piece was being worked on, right, it was framed as an investigation, right? They asked for, a lot of folks don't understand how 501c3s work, but if you're a 501c3, if anybody requests your 990, which is your tax filing document, you have to produce it within a week, and all these. Most of these things now you can just pull offline through various online resources. But it's one of those things. A lot of times, media outlets will ask for our 990s, and it's kind of a hostile, like we're looking into you, we're going to dig into your tax filing documents, and we're always like, sure, here you go, and by all means, this reporter, the two reporters who worked on this are no friends of the organization, and they didn't try to be friendly to us, right? They talked to a lot of people who don't like us, and they published all their quotes. But what I appreciated about this was like, yeah, this is who we are, right? Yeah. Like, I'm sorry, I don't want the Southern Poverty Law Center to like us, right? If Ohio for Honest Education, which is really a teachers unions hack organization, if they like us, we're doing something wrong. And so I was like, yeah, I'm glad this is what these people are saying about us, because these people have terrible agendas and they want to wreak a lot of harm on our state. And so I looked at that story and thought, yeah, this is who we are. And I'm grateful and proud that this is the picture that people have when they look at us, and they can't deny the results that you're seeing.
Yeah. And to their credit as reporters, I think there are people who are with us who saw that and thought this was great.
Yeah.
And those people who don't like us are probably reading that saying, I told you so. And
right.
to their credit, I think the reporters at least didn't try and pretty straight, even if their intent was not honorable or not biased toward us.
And just to that end, like Jesse Balmert in particular at the Cincinnati Enquirer, I always have thought Jesse's a very fair reporter. She's not, again,
fair is a great word.
I don't want to say that when I say she's not a friend of the organization, I don't mean that hostilely. Like she's not trying to make CCB look bad. Yeah. She's not trying to make us look good or bad.
Exactly.
She's trying to tell the story as it is. And I feel like that's what that piece did. Again, one of my favorite things about it too, besides like it just kept dancing on complimenting David so much, and it's like he's actually not.
I think that was a rooster.
We'll come back on that one. I'm gonna come.
We're not done there.
I'm gonna pull that one up because that one is hilarious to me.
Well, no, I mean, to the listeners, I mean, think back to issue 1, and we were talking about the abortion amendment and things like that, and all these crazy ads were coming out, about taking away, women's health care, and we were just like praying, like, Lord, this media thing, like, help us, like, slay this giant. They're relentless, and to hear what I would consider opposition 90% of the time say that we are relentless, right? I mean, I want T-shirts made there.
Yeah, exactly. That's the
like that word right there. Just said, caused me to say thank you, Lord.
Well, and it's the best part about all that too was it talked about the influence the Lord has granted us, but it highlighted how CCV and me personally, we've never made a single political donation in Ohio, and what's important about that is I encourage people to make donations to politicians. They absolutely should, like, be involved in the process, support the people. That you can't have good candidates if they don't raise money. So you need to be giving to the people you believe in. But we don't do that because we want to show that we're not trying to buy votes. Right? Like we want to see the process work through ideas, through prayer, and through pressure from the community, from the grassroots. And that's what you see in that story really shine through is, hey, we're able to accomplish some pretty significant things by building relationships, building trust, and bringing people into the process that a lot of times their voices aren't heard.
Yeah, and there was so much directed at the overall agenda, but if you get past that, where they talk to the people on the left, and you see, well, CCV gets results. They rely on grassroots efforts. They're willing to work with lawmakers even when they don't agree on everything.
Right.
They don't demand that lawmakers fall in lockstep with them. There were just a lot of positives if you're willing to look through those details and see the way that CCV actually operates. Paints an excellent picture of how we go about our work here.
Well, and yeah, again, now we are going to start talking nice about David, but like,
Boo.
yeah,
Gather the kids.
we had not, and we probably this probably should be something we track, but it's just, we're pretty busy around here. We had not actually tracked how many bills we lobby for and register on one way or another. And I think it said something like 300 plus pieces of legislation over the last 5 years or whatever.
That's probably something the comms guy should know.
Yeah, right. That's something, or the policy team should know, or something.
Exhausted.
Somebody around here should know that. But and one of them are not the chicken bill that Corinne wanted us to. There was a chicken bill. We have somebody on our team that likes to raise chickens and
Hear about one more chicken.
has tried to get us to lobby on behalf of home chicken roosting.
Ended up with egg on our face.
But speaking of roosts, we would be remiss if we did not actually take a moment to compliment David from the left, which is where David feels most comfortable. So there is this fan of CCV, big fan of mine, who is a liberal blogger, who just he likes to go around and put cameras in people's faces and make a scene of things.
Shark jock.
And he just wrote a blog post a few weeks ago about Cleveland.com's best of the Capitol rankings, right? So Cleveland.com, formerly Cleveland Plain Dealer, does these best of the Capitol awards every year, where they take nominations for things like most popular or rising star Democrat, rising star Republican, best Republican staffer, best
Biggest windbag.
Yeah, and then it gets playful. Biggest windbag, best use of social media, worst use of social media, least savvy, least tech savvy lobby or politician, which our dear friend Representative Bill Dean used to win every year. Right?
Fishy Bill.
I know, yeah, he was great. But nobody would ever accuse Bill of being particularly tech savvy.
He's probably not listening to this podcast.
Exactly. It's not on the AM radio. Representative Dean is not listening to this podcast. But they also have hardest working lobbyist and most effective lobbyist. And David was nominated this year for most effective lobbyist. And so we're trying to, we're taking our cues from the political left and trying to pack the ballots into the and vote as many times as we can for David.
My grandpa's both voted for him.
That's good, right? Yeah, exactly. But this liberal blogger published who he was voting for on all of these, and under most effective lobbyist, he voted for David Mahan of the Center for Christian Virtue. And I'm gonna read to you what he wrote. He said, "I don't have to like it,
Which he doesn't.
Neither do
but
we.
I do respect the way that Mahan can push a largely unpopular agenda through the State House corridors, because he is nothing if not a smooth operator."
Write that down, family.
Did
Did you
again,
just sing Smooth Operator?
did.
just for what it's worth.
Just for you, David.
I've
Merry
never
Christmas.
seen this guy and David in the same room, so I'm actually wondering. Anyway, and then he goes on to say, and I would be, and again, to his credit, he says, and I would be lying if I didn't appreciate him almost single-handedly beating the gambling expansion in Ohio earlier this year. Which, again, one of the things we appreciate about this guy is that he opposed the massive expansion of gaming onto iPhones, mobile gaming. And so, a broken clock is right twice a day.
And this may not be one of them.
But I do think, again, like to David's point about the article, guys, when you do the right thing for the right reason in the right way, and not that we always do the right thing, like we know we make mistakes, but I think you see the faithfulness of what's being done here and across the country really shining through.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. Well, I'm going to drop my first one, and it's a little selfish.
A little bit.
There's this weird Venn diagram with me where my interests don't always overlap with the work that we do. And you guys know I'm a big Cleveland Guardians fan, right? I talk about the Guardians a lot. So the betting scandal that two of their pitchers, the way that came out at first just seemed like nothing, but then the tidal wave of issues around micro bets, sports gambling that took off in a way I didn't expect when news of Luis Ortiz first broke. And now the fact that Ohio specifically might be in a position to do something about it. This might be more of a forward-looking story in that piece for the years to come. But I just thought it exposed something that I felt was more of me being a get off my lawn and sports aren't the way that they used to be kind of moment for me of like, no, there are some fundamental issues with the way we are treating sports betting in our professional sports that are ruining the integrity of the game. And to see it come to light the way it did, it was hard as a Guardians fan to lose two really good pitchers and guys who were key to their hopes this year. But then to see that the governor speaking out on this and that there is some I think momentum or maybe desire to address it on a legislative level was encouraging to me ultimately.
Yeah, no, I think, Mike, just to that end, this is hopefully a moment in the next 3 to 5 years that we'll look back on and say something changed starting in 2025, because all of the momentum on the gambling expansion side had been on just more and more and more and more. And this year, and you're right, the Guardian scandal was I feel like the first one that really broke through. Like there had been some little stories here and there of things happening, but this was the first time that, Emmanuel Clase was arguably the best or one of the best closers in all of baseball. And he went from, he just disappeared one day, right? Like his locker was just cleaned out one day, right? Was the way it went. And for that to happen, and then to follow up with the Chauncey Billups story and the Terry Rozier story of them being involved with the Damon Jones story, all of that I think was the Wall Street Journal published.
These are athletes, David, by the way.
They're basketball players. David at least knows a little bit of basketball. Yeah,
Chauncey Billups, I go back.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but hopefully, and you're actually starting to see more Republicans, and even, I mean, David's experience even at the State House with this has been even Republicans that had been, sort of all gas, no brakes on expanding gambling. Even they are starting to have some cold feet on these things now. And to your point, Mike, like all of us, if you've been a sports fan for the last 20 plus years, you have seen how sports have changed. Both the not just the advertising of it, but your lived experience. I can't watch a football game with my wife now where if somebody misses a 40-yard field goal or somebody drops a wide open pass, she's going to make the comment like, "Oh, that's rigged." Like,
back of your mind,
right? On the take.
Yeah, a random flag gets thrown to negate a touchdown, like, and you can't help but wonder, right? Even if it's not actually, I bet the vast majority of the time that stuff's happening. It's not that it's rigged, but just the doubt that this could be rigged is something that's ruining the sport.
Watching the videos of young men that have worked hard on their craft, since, they were little kids, now they get to a place where, maybe they're in NCAA and they're just weeping on camera because, they took a prop, bet, whatever situation. And then they ask them why, and they say, well, the family needed money, this, that, and the third. But I think, when you think of CCV and our Christian stance on things, you kind of think about how these things are harming children, harming families, men betting the house and gambling being the top reason or the top vice, I guess, that causes addiction, that causes suicide. But then there's that piece that you guys are talking about that I could probably care a little less about, which is destroying the game, right? So it's kind of bringing everybody together, those that are, opposed to the moral issue here, but also just the fact that, man, this was a great sport. And I don't even know if I want to watch anymore.
Yeah. And Dave, even to that point, when you talk about bringing folks together, this is one of the more interesting things that's come out on this topic, is how one of the bonding aspects of American life has been sports, right? And gambling is statistically, especially with young men, driving young men more apart. We talked about this on the podcast before. Of it's hard, especially in this day and age, for men to get together and hang out, right? And sports was one of those things that brought them together. And
It's true.
and
I do miss that part
yeah,
of, yeah. I used to watch certain games, and I don't anymore, but I miss the fellowship
right.
of when we watch those games.
Yeah,
That's true.
it's just something you can do with other guys. And what you're seeing with gambling is more and more you don't root for a team, right? You're picking the best bet that you think is going to win. So you're not going all in. Hey, I'm again, I told the story on the podcast before where I met when I first moved out to Phoenix and I started going to Scottsdale Bible Church. And I met some guys there that were Cubs fans. And it was great because Maria hadn't moved out yet. I didn't know anybody. And all right, we can get together and watch a Cubs game. There's a reason for me to hang out with other guys, right? That if all you care about is the over under or how many hits someone's going to get or how many yards, and you guys don't really care about the team, like there's no reason for you to get together to watch the game. You kind of probably want to watch it by yourself so you can live bet and prop bet as you go and try to make your money back.
And if you become an idiot because it's not going the way that you want, you're not doing it in front of a bunch of people.
Exactly. So yeah, I think you're right, Mike. That is what's happening with sports betting is a huge story from 2025.
He said I was right.
Is
Did you
it?
hear that? You hear that, David? You
A
heard it.
lot of firsts today, right here on the narrative.
In a culture where many Christians feel pressured to stay silent and where biblical truth is often dismissed as irrelevant, CCV is again inviting and gathering believers from across Ohio and beyond to learn why their voice matters and how faith must shape public life for our third annual Essential Summit coming to Columbus in October. You can be first in line right now for the 2026 Essential Summit featuring Frank Turek and, backed by popular demand, Dr. Rosaria Butterfield. Through December 31st, if you use the code FIRSTINLINE at essentialsummit.org, that's code FIRSTINLINE, you can secure your spot to attend next year at the lowest price we will have available. Don't wait, this event is going to fill up quickly. Go to essentialsummit.org and guarantee your place at the 2026 Essential Summit. All right, Aaron, what do you got for your second one?
All right, this one's quick. The federal school choice program, right? Again, when I think about what happened in 2025, that's going to resonate. Trump creating the first in the One Big Beautiful Bill, the first ever national school choice program. It's the tax credit, just like we have here in Ohio, where you can make a $1,700 per person donation to a scholarship granting organization and get a dollar for dollar tax credit back. So it's a donation that costs you nothing. And all of that money you give then goes to help kids pay for private school or Christian school in our case, is a huge deal, right? This is going to go into effect January 1, 2027. We have this program here in Ohio on your state income tax. We've done $9.4 million in scholarships in Ohio just through this alone. It's $750 per person here, but it's a huge opportunity. And what I keep telling folks is this is really the biggest evangelism opportunity in American history with what they put in the One Big Beautiful Bill, because this program is conceived as a multi-billion-dollar. So just think about that. You're going to have billions of dollars of scholarships for kids to be able to afford a Christian school. This has never happened before. And it doesn't go into effect until January 1, 2027. So there's about a year beforehand. And we're going to be talking about this a whole lot more. But the seeds that were planted with this is going to be the actual education reform we need. And the biggest thing I'd say about that, too, that's important is it's permanent law. Right. So the only way this gets repealed is if there's 60 teachers unions votes in the U.S. Senate to repeal it. So this is going to be in place for a generation to come. And David, you and I have talked for years about what's happening to kids in public schools. This is both one, helping kids get out, but also bringing the pressure to bear to reform the public schools. And I really think 10 years from now, 15 years from now, we're going to look back on 2025 when this passed and say that was a turning point in our country.
Yeah, it's definitely another one of those moments that was major. But to our listeners, how many of you heard?
Right.
That was going on? I was speaking to a room full of ministers, pastors, just Friday, and last week, and in most of the room, I mean, you should have heard it when I talked about this $1,700 tax SGO thing. I mean, they were like, they were shocked and
Right.
stunned that this was available, and they wanted us to come back and talk about how they could participate. But this is major, not just for our low income families, but just for education as a whole. I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah. David, next one.
Okay, so the hostage release, the Israeli hostage release. I think, you know, when you have an extreme loss of life, like they experienced, the way they experienced it, and then over the years, it just kind of gets watered down with all the propaganda, from the left, and um, you know, it, to see those people released, and even the bodies that they lost loved ones, to get that closure in that moment and probably sadly it was like 2 weeks, right, and then we're on to the next thing, right, Venezuela or whatever it is, but for those families to get that closure, and for everybody to focus on the true moment of 3,000 plus lives being lost from that Gaza attack, that Palestinian attack. I think that was one of the major 2025 stories.
That was my third one, actually, Dave. So thanks for plagiarizing me once again. But I think that's undeniable. Again, thinking about what happened this year that's going to resonate in history. The combination of the hostages coming home, but how did we get to a place of the hostages coming home? Well, Hezbollah was completely decimated. Iran's nuclear capability completely decimated. Hamas has been severely weakened.
Syria.
Syria is out of like there is a new dynamic in the Middle East now because of this, where Israel is arguably safer than it's ever been, in many ways, right? And that was even when I was last over there in 2018. In the States, we were always talking about China or Russia or things like that. In Israel, they just knew at some point or another it was going to come to a head with Iran, and the prayer in all of it was that it didn't come to a head by Iran getting a nuclear weapon and dropping it on Israel, right? That was just the concern of all of it um, was that the only way that Israel is going to actually be able to defend itself is if Iran did something radical first. And the way all of this has played out, obviously, there's been massive loss of lives on all sides of this, which is terrible. But Israel being able to defend itself and secure a long future is just incredible. Now, the flip side of that, though, the the I don't want to say the bad news of this, because I think there's a piece of this that we have to recognize. This is the hostages coming home, and the new dynamic in the Middle East is such a net gain for the Israeli people and the Jewish people. However, the rise of anti-Semitism, which I think is a part of this, in large part because of the propaganda game that you see from Hamas and from the left, is significant. And the attacks, I mean, there was, just the attack on the Hanukkah celebration in Australia. There is more attacks on Jewish people right now than we've seen in a very long time. And I'm concerned even too seeing Christians, their support for Israel and just general tolerance of anti-Semitism, I think, is going up significantly. I do think it's important. Like I agree with what JD Vance said a few weeks ago when he said, "Listen, you can be critical of the Israeli government, and that doesn't make you an anti-Semite." That's 100% right. Right. Again, we might have talked about this on the podcast before. Like Israel has one of the highest abortion rates in the developed world. Right. Like there's things that Israel is not a perfect country, and that we should be able to criticize individual decisions they make and things like that. But there is no comparison, especially when you look at Middle Eastern countries, between Israel and the rest of the Middle Eastern world, right? That Israel is the freest, best ally we have there. The Middle East is a massively important country for the U.S. Interests. And Israel values human rights and cares for its people and does so much more than any of those nations around it. It's one of the things that I just find so disgusting about the way the left does whataboutism with Israel, because every complaint you could lob against Israel, every other country in the Middle East, and in a lot of, honestly, like even in Europe, would fall by that standard that they get held to sometimes.
Well, I guess I'm back up again. I'm gonna bring it back to Ohio, and I'm gonna say the Hope in the Future report that we put out in the spring. Just as I reflect back on this year and the response we've seen from specifically churches to that, when we said, "Hey, this is the state of marriage and family in Ohio," put out the Family Structure Index that showed nationally we ranked in the latter half of all states. Um, I just couldn't help but think, Aaron, back to when I was interviewing at CCV in 2022, and I remember you asked me kind of what I care about, and it was kids and families, and still very close to my heart, supporting families, seeing strong families in our community. And it's one thing to put in all the work to produce and roll out the report. It's another thing when you see the church in Ohio respond the way that they have and say, yep, that is exactly what we're looking for. We're in. That's just been so encouraging to me. And again, one of these watershed moments where you think we're going to look back at that and we're going to be able to pinpoint that as a moment of change for families in the state of Ohio. That's my prayer.
Yeah, it's newsworthy when it's not just the church talking about it.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so sitting in hearings throughout the year and hearing several lawmakers, if not reference Hope in the Future, but more specifically reference the data in the report over and over again. I mean, it blesses me. The word is getting out, and in large part because of our comms department. So
another compliment.
Yeah,
that's new.
See that? Hey,
wow.
Hey,
Merry Christmas to me.
But love 2026 quota. It's not even the 2026 yet. That's good. No, I mean, yeah, David, just to your point, it was brought up the other day. The $20 million that was allocated in the state budget for fatherhood initiatives is a direct follow up to that Hope in a Future report. And you saw, I think at least 20 states, it might have been more, published stories about the Family Structure Index that ranked the states based off of how strong their families are. And that was that was the purpose of this, is can we start a real conversation? It's probably been one of the most frustrating aspects of my career, is sitting down with so many very well-intentioned, often either political leaders or, I don't want to say this condescendingly, bureaucrats who want to make a difference on things like drugs, or want to make a difference on things like foster care and adoption, and or violence, or whatever, the education, right? And they're spending all this money, and they're spinning their tires, and they're doing all this work, and the issue isn't getting better. And why is that? Well, it's frankly because they're not dealing with the root of the problem, which is the decline of marriage and the collapse of family. And again, you talk to any of them, especially in the education space, where you used to live, especially, and every teacher will say, well, these kids have no support at home, right? And so why can't we just have the conversation then about, well, let's deal with that problem? We all agree that's the biggest thing, that's why the kids are struggling. So let's actually try to deal with that, instead of just, it's like a defeatist mindset of like, well, there's nothing we can do about this. No one's ever going to change. And the reality is the data shows people change to this. They could go back to valuing marriage and family if only we value it ourselves.
All right, Aaron, you're up for your last one. You're going to have to pick. Throw a dart, throw a dart at the dartboard.
Dave stole so many of mine because he can't come up
talking
with
about Jewish people. Doesn't mean that it's your
original thoughts here, man. Like I'm saying, this is, I think, again, thinking about what's going to have the longest tail or the longest impact, the Health and Human Services report that came out on pediatric gender medicine, what is the way it was described, but really the transgender medical procedures that were being done on kids. What's so important about that is a stake in the ground that's peer reviewed, that's above reproach, that shows this was an incredible catastrophe that happened in America and around the world, but America especially. And it can never happen again. And how do we make sure these things never happen again? Well, we need the evidence. David and I, David probably has PTSD from this, but the number of times we would get into debates on these things, and it's just so stupid, right? The transgender medicine.
Why are we talking about the UK? This is the US.
And well, the American Medical Association and the American Endocrinology Association, they all say this is good and we should do this. And it's like they have no evidence to say this is good. And by the way, if your doctor is telling you dudes can get pregnant, run.
That's a problem.
Right? Yeah. Like if I go to my mechanic and he says, "I'm going to change your tires so your car can fly," we're leaving, right? Like you don't need a medical degree to say this is very stupid. Which is why I'm so excited to go to this Cleveland City Club to say, this is, I know there are so many people that are looking forward to firing hard questions at me about transgender medicine on kids. And I'm going to say, that's really dumb. If you think
tickets on sale now, January 16th.
Exactly. If you think a boy could become but because of this HHS report, we now have the receipts to show what common sense says. And hopefully, I think this HHS report is one more piece, just like the COVID stuff, that is waking Americans up to the corruption of the medical establishment, to the politicalization of everything. When we allow our medical associations, our hospitals to be driven by political ideologues, this is what happens. And I would even say I want to take it to that next step of when we allow these associations to be driven by people who deny their creator.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It's Pilate saying to Jesus, "What is truth?" Right? If you can't answer that question and you're in charge of a lot of things, it's eventually going to get bad. And that's unfortunately we had to live through COVID and some of this gender stuff and even some other things that are still going on today for Americans to start waking up to that.
David, last one.
On that same line, many of you over the years have heard us talking about SAFE Act, and we rejoiced that the SAFE Act passed. What Tennessee had, we were one of 20 some states that passed such legislation, but one of the first was in Tennessee, and their case made it all the way up to the Supreme Court, and it hit in June. And so I know we talked about it, but most people would not know the name Scrimeti. Yep. But the United States Supreme Court made a determination that they upheld the ban in Tennessee against the medicalization of children in this manner, with the pediatric sex change procedures. And so that sent, just shockwaves across the nation to groups like ours and others. And I believe in terms of medical malpractice lawsuits that are now, I think we've got at least 12 of them in motion at this point. And with this report that Aaron's talking about, I would imagine that there'd be a whole lot more hitting in 2026. But that's a major case and a major blow to the ideologues, the gender ideologues out there.
Well, I'll go with my last one, and I'm going to say the mifepristone report that
was mine. See, I got that on here too. That was the other one I had. See, you guys just
we're so aligned. Look at us. Look at us. But as we've talked about numerous times, we saw in the One Big Beautiful Bill the long-awaited defunding of Planned Parenthood, but also expressed, hey, some of these clinics that we're seeing closing because of this, it doesn't really have the impact we think it might because of mail order abortion pills being available. And to see this report come out so clearly highlighting and the documented harms to women who had taken these pills beyond the fact that it's killing their babies, but that it was harming them as well. I hope that that's another one of those catalysts for change that we can look back here in 2025 and say that was a big moment because it really exposed what this poison pill is doing to women.
Yeah, when you consider that more than half of the abortions in America today are done by pill, And you start to hear some of these stories, like the story in Texas where the guy drugged his girlfriend with an abortion pill. The guy up in Toledo, the I'm going to call it out too, the Muslim guy up in Toledo that did this to his girlfriend, who ordered and when he ordered abortion pills under his wife's name. That's the you see how legal abortion generally is a tool for oppressive men, right? For men who want to do terrible things to women. But when you make it so easy for these pills to be purchased, and quite frankly, when you can order this stuff online, you don't know what's all in that pill too, right? It's so incredibly dangerous. And so for the Ethics and Public Policy Center and our friends that were involved in this, to bring those numbers forward and call the FDA out, which has still done nothing. And I've lost complete confidence in FDA Director McCary to actually execute on this, right? I think he's become far more political than medical, and isn't seems to very clearly be slow walking doing the follow up to this EPPC study to reevaluate the label and make the abortion pill say what it actually does. This study is going a long way to forcing us to grapple with the truth.
That's what I love most about this story, is that it's no longer a fringe issue anymore, right? I mean, now it's HHS secretaries involved. Now it's the president, it's Congress.
Yep.
It's National Institute of Health is asking questions. What is going on here? And that report helped bring everything to the forefront.
Yeah, and believe me, I know we left safe, legal, and rare in the abortion discussion in the rearview mirror a long time ago, but it's showing that 2 of those 3 conditions don't exist with the abortion pill.
That's exactly right. And it wakes up the left. This is the thing about this, is that if we want to get to a place where abortion is illegal and a thing of the past in America, we need to start convincing voters over to our side, right? This was what our exit poll showed us, is how do we start bringing people over to see this? And studies like the EPPC study are confirmation to the pro-life messaging as we try to build a coalition that could eventually roll back abortion.
It was a busy year.
It was, man.
That was a lot of stuff to cover,
and
but
26 is going to be even better. That's the fun part.
Maybe if we can wake David up for it.
And you just fed us all this food downstairs at the party, and can't feed us at noon and then expect you to stay awake.
Chocolate thing, was it an eclair that had like graham crackers and pudding? And oh my gosh, that was so good.
Yeah,
manner of sorcery.
We're by no means done recording today. This is just our episode for post-Christmas. We got a couple other things we need to get in the can today, but I think we need to take a little break, get a nap in before we move on to the next one. So I want to thank all of our narrative listeners for a great year. It's been a privilege to speak with you every week and to help you navigate these issues. And we look forward to being back with you in 2026. Thanks for tuning in today here on The Narrative. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Narrative, presented by CCV and produced by Wessler Media. If you found today's episode insightful, leave us a review or rating and subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. We're your hosts, Mike Andrews, Aaron Baer, and David Mahan, and we'll see you next time on The Narrative.